Now, my start of thought on this presentation was just reflecting on smart people, smart testers that I have known throughout the years that nonetheless managed to really create a great deal of difficulties for themselves. Actually, it sort of started even before that, because I had sort of a realization that I think for most people, most of the problems in their lives are problems that they create for themselves. And then I particularized that in testing and thought about, well, what are the kinds of problems that testers create for themselves through their behaviors? And reflecting on that, trying to think about what those problems were, I came up with my top 7 list. This is not scientifically proven top 7 list, it's just the 7 things that happened to occur to me while I was thinking about putting this presentation together. So if you want to argue with me later about an 8th or 9th deadly sin, feel free, I won't take it too badly, but I do have to warn you, I had durian for dessert last night. So if you come up and want to have an argument with me, you better be ready for the durian smell, because I'm probably just, radiating durian. It's going to be great too, because tonight I get to fly back to the United States, so I'll be sleeping on an airplane next to a total stranger sweating out durian. So, hey, there you go. Better that than my wife. Okay, so the 7 deadly sins. Irrelevance or redundancy. Ignorance of relevant skills or facts. Being an obstructionist. Putting yourself in an adversarial position. Nitpicking. Being completely blind to project and organizational priorities, and to coin a word, last momentism. So let's go through these, and I'm going to illustrate each one with a case study. Let's start with irrelevance and redundancy. So this is just doing stuff that really doesn't matter that much, or doing stuff that's already been done by somebody else. Repeating tests that somebody else has run. Going off and testing things that nobody really cares about, your own little personal interests that you say, oh, I'm going to test this, I'm going to test that. Why? Well, because I think that's important. Oh, really? Okay, well, who exactly made you God of the product? Maybe it's important to you, but you are not the only stakeholder in the product. So, this is a fairly easy problem to solve. There's kind of an Americanism that says that there's a reason why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should be listening twice as much as you're talking. And so, part of this is just listening to what's going on around you in the project. Talking to stakeholders about what they care about. Using strategies like risk-based testing where you pull in stakeholder input and figure out how to test based on that. Know what other people are doing. Know what the plan is for unit testing. Know what the plan is for component integration testing if you're not going to be involved in that. Get closer to your stakeholders. Now, you're sitting there going, what is a stakeholder? Is that somebody who has some kind of like garden implement that they stick in the ground and they're holding it? No, that's not what I'm talking about. Stakeholders, anybody with an interest in the quality or testing of the product. Those are your stakeholders. You should know who they are. You should talk to them. You don't have to be friends with them, but you can't be their enemies. And you have to be ready to listen to them. Okay? So know your stakeholders. It's the key to getting relevant. And make sure that they know that you are trying to be relevant. So I said I was going to illustrate these with case studies. And I think it'd be fair to start out by admitting in the very first case study that this, I'm a former sinner myself. I've committed one of these deadly sins. Back in the 90s, when I was a test manager testing a multi-operating system, multi-database query tool, we got really, really into automating the testing. Because we had this cool test harness that would allow us to submit literally thousands of predefined queries to this tool. And because data is data, regardless of operating system or database, we were supposed to get back the same result from the query no matter which version of the application we were testing, no matter which operating system or database it was running on. So we thought this was just totally cool, and we started propagating these queries to as many different supported operating system database combinations as we could find. This is what we focused on. Well, guess what? This is not the problem that was being reported to tech support. The thing that was killing the tech support people was it won't install. I kept hearing that over and over. I can't install it. I can't get it to work. Or the user interface sucks. I hate the user interface. I can never figure out how to get from one place to another. But we didn't see that because here we were, heads down, beavering away on our automated test suite, making it run in as many places as possible. I had a manager once years ago. It was I learned a lot about how not to be a manager from this fellow. And one of my colleagues at the time described him really well, I thought. He said, he's the kind of guy that if you went to him and told him you had a flat tire on your car, would start giving you advice about how to change your shoes. Right? Just completely beside the point. So that's sort of what we were doing. We were beside the point. We were giving the developers advice on how to change the shoes on the product, and it's sitting by the side of the road with a flat tire, from the point of view of the users. So we added tests and tried to get over that once we had the initial shock of having the tech support manager come to me and, well, there are various ways to put this, but the polite way is inform me of the error of my ways. And so we spent time getting the manual tests in order and focused more on usability and installation. But it was really hard to undo that image of those testers don't know what they're doing, they're not relevant, they don't understand the customers. Now, you could say that this is sort of a different form of irrelevance, but this is kind of different enough from the other irrelevance that I wanted to make a special point of it. Not having proper skills with respect to testing, the underlying technology, the application domain, the business problem being solved, what business your company is in. Just not understanding what you're about and how to be effective. One of the reasons that testing has an image of being sort of second class, not as important, if you will, as developers, I think has to do with this particular issue of perception that our skills are not up to the mark development-wise. And don't understand the technology, don't necessarily understand the business problem. Right, so the developers are going to look at a tester and say, I know a lot more about technology than that person. The business analysts are going to look at a tester and say, I know a lot more about the business domain than that person. All right, now obviously you should know more about testing, but it's important that we be well-rounded and that we have skill in all three areas. So if you're a test manager, make sure that you've gone through a process of identifying what those critical skills are for your team. And again, consider three areas: technology, testing, and application domain. I would say that of the dozens of clients that I've done assessments for around the world, it's very rare for me to go in and find that those three skill sets are in balance. There's almost always an imbalance. So unless you are actively assessing and managing the skills of your team as a test manager, you should probably assume that you are out of balance, that your team does not have the skills that it needs. So go through that process, figure out where you stand with respect to skills, and assuming that you find a gap, and I'm assuming that you probably would if you've never done this exercise before, not only should you execute some kind of skills development plan to get your team up to where they need to be, but you're also going to have to engage in an outward focused marketing campaign, if you will, across the organization to convince people that you're addressing this problem. Because if your team does does not have the skills that it should have, it's probably not invisible to other people. It's probably quite visible. So, case study of this. I'm going to take a guess and guess that more than half of the people who are currently being paid to test in some capacity or another, they get a paycheck and their role is testing, whether that's their title or not. More than half of those people could not create, could not design a set of tests using equivalence partitioning. Most of those people probably wouldn't even know what an equivalence partition was. Some of them might know what it was, but would not know how to apply it. That is a remarkable state of affairs. That's like finding that the average programmer was writing their programs in Fortran or COBOL because that was the language they knew. They had no idea about structured programming, never programmed in C, never programmed in C++, didn't know object-oriented programming. That's sort of the state of affairs that we find ourselves in. And this is bad. And equivalence partitioning is a basic concept described in Glenford Meyer's book, Art of Software Testing. It's over 30, 40 years old. It's a basic concept. It's stunning. Now, part of this is externally imposed, and part of it we are doing to ourselves professionally. So the externally imposed part is anyone can test, how hard could it be, just make sure it works before we put it into production attitude. Which, if you've not heard that as a test manager, you just haven't talked to enough people. Have a conversation with some of your management peers, if you're a test manager, and ask them what testing skills they think your tester should have. Most of them will probably say, I don't even know how hard can the testing be. Make sure it works. You need to understand the technology, you need to understand the business problem, but just make sure it works. So that's an education issue for us. We have to explain to people that is not a correct perception. Excuse me. Now, another problem is that people don't necessarily get the right training that they need to learn testing. And we get training that's kind of all over the place. So one person might have been trained in how to use a technique, and another person might have been trained in how to use the same technique, but since they took different training, for whatever reason, the people who taught it referred to it by different names, and you have this terminology issue. We're not really good at getting our terminology together, structuring ourselves around some sort of common set of terms and concepts. So that's a self-inflicted wound. Probably the biggest self-inflicted wound that we have to getting agreement on what it means to be a professional tester has been this concept of schools of testing that you might have heard of. This is this idea that you have to commit to a single testing strategy and stick with that strategy regardless of the situation. Ironically enough, this came from a group of people that consider themselves context-driven, so it's kind of a bizarre set of affairs. But regardless of whatever merits this concept might or might not have, as a practical matter, it has proven to be a huge barrier to discourse within our profession. And if anybody tries to convince you that you need to commit to one school or another, I would encourage you to say, no, I do whatever makes sense on the project when I'm working on the project. I'll be happy to pick my strategies when I know what situation I'm dealing with. Now, we have come a long way in the last 10 years or so on this, a little over 10 years. As of this year, as of a few months ago, the ICTV program has certified 300,000 people around the world. So that's a huge change, and now we have a lot more people out there that are speaking a common language and have familiarity with these basic testing techniques. So we can hope that that continues to grow, and then we start to drive out at least some of the self-inflicted ignorance within the testing profession. Okay, so having gored a sacred cow, or not so sacred cow, obstructionism. So, are you an obstacle? Is it your job to be an obstacle? Now see, when I put it that way, you probably think, oh, no, I'm not an obstacle. But, you know, do you think that you should enforce entry and exit criteria? Is that your job? Should you ensure that a particular process is followed? Is that your job? Are you a process cop? Are you convinced that only by slowing things down can you help people avoid making mistakes? If so, then you are defining yourself as an obstacle. You're making it your business to be an obstacle. Now, why do testers make themselves into obstacles? Why are testers obstructionists? Well, one of the problems is this process cop issue, and I'm going to illustrate this with a case study. If you think that your job is to be a process cop, to enforce process, to enforce entry and exit criteria, to make sure that everybody plays by the software development lifecycle rules, check that assumption carefully, and I'll explain why you need to be very careful about that in a moment. Now, sometimes people mistake having integrity with being a jerk. Okay? They think that having integrity means saying whatever is in their mind at any point in time to whoever happens to be around. That's not integrity. That's just being a jerk. That's just alienating people. Okay? Now, good for you if you're in a situation where you can alienate people in your job and you don't have to worry about it. That's called being independently wealthy. And if you're independently wealthy, that's great. You did a fine job of choosing your parents. Okay? But most of us who have to work for a living should be a little more careful about alienating people that they work with. Okay? So if you have people within your team who have this contrary personality, who like to alienate people, that make fights, so forth, or if you think you need to be a process cop, understand that this kind of history of obstructionism will seriously damage your reputation in a long-term kind of way. Because this is the kind of thing that people end up taking personally. Okay, so a case study on that. I'm also going to come back to process cop too a little later because I think it's very important. I worked with a tester at one point, on and off, as a test manager, and he was a really, really good tester. And as long as you kept him inside the doors of the test lab, he was great to have around. But everything was bad. Never had a good thing to say about product quality, never had a good thing to say about any of the other managers on the project team, always was making fun of the developers. He was the kind of guy that you just, really couldn't get him in front of people outside of the test team. There's an old joke about programmers, and it's like the greatest programmer is the person who just sits in their office all the time. You slide pizza under the door of their office, and they just sit there and code, and they never talk to anybody. Kind of a joke about the less than stellar social skills of some people in technology. But unfortunately, this guy was kind of that way. Great guy, really great guy, but just not able to interface well with people outside of testing. Okay. So related to that, maybe an extreme version of that is adversarialism. Again, defining process cop, quality cop, you know, I'm the only one in this organization who cares about quality. If it weren't for me, this, you know, we'd be delivering garbage all the time. If you feel like your job is to be in an adversarial role, you know, again, why? Why do you feel that? Really, what are the objectives that have been defined for you that say your job is to enforce quality, your job is to enforce a process? This again, like obstructionism, if you're defining yourself into an adversarial role, people really can't help but take it personally. And it will create problems, sometimes very serious ones.
We have got this new testing unit, it's about a few months old, and we are implementing production defect management, and we have set up a process. So in the process, it states that whatever production defect that comes to us should reach the testers at 5 every day. It needs to be deployed on that particular night.
So let me make sure I understand so far. So when a production defect comes in, it gets routed to the test team.
It has been fixed and pass the testing team for testing.
Okay.
So we have set up a process. It should reach us by 5.
So the developers are supposed to give you a fix to the production bug by 5 o'clock each day. For to put, okay, so that'll be promoted into production that night, if it reaches you by 5 o'clock. Okay.
What we do is, if it reaches us late, let's say at 6, so we just reject. So we tell the developers it will be deployed tomorrow. So is that too rigid?
So if it shows up at 6, then it gets put into the next days. And are you the one enforcing that rule? Yes. Okay. So but who made that rule?
We made and it has been endorsed by the higher management.
Okay. So management endorsed that rule. So you basically said, as long as we get it by 5, we can have it tested in time for it to go into production. But if it shows up after 5, we won't be able to do that, right? And management said, okay, that's reasonable. We'll make the rule. Now, when you reject it, well, how do people react to that? They're not happy, I would guess, right?
Sometimes they're not.
Sometimes they're not happy. Yeah. See, this is yeah. You're straying into sin land here because you're enforcing a process, and you know there's certainly very good reason for that process, but the problem is that you're going to have, well, there's some human psychology here. It's called projection. And projection is where somebody projects onto someone or something how they feel about someone or something else. So what's going to happen now is that people are going to project onto you and your team personally how they feel about this process and rule, and specifically in that situation. So the ideal thing, I mean, the rule makes sense. What I'm saying is try to get yourself out of the enforcement rule. See if you can make somebody else the enforcer of that rule. You see what I mean? You've got to have rules. You can't, if you don't have rules, you don't have a process, you just have chaos, right? I'm not saying don't have rules. What I'm saying is make it somebody else's problem to enforce those rules. See if you can get management to own the accept, reject decision. That make sense? So it's probably easy to say and maybe harder to do, but you know, for example, maybe you could set the tool up, whatever tool is being used to route the reports, set the tool up to automatically, for anything that comes back after 5 o'clock, to automatically set the target promotion date to be the next day, and to automatically escalate that up to management. So then it becomes not about how your team was inflexible and wouldn't accept a late bug fix. It's about how the development team got it to you late. They missed their deadline, and that's why it's not in there. See, as opposed to, it's not in there because the test team wouldn't take it, which is what you're setting yourself up for now. You're setting yourself up to be the fall person, the scapegoat. Why isn't it in production? Well, you know, those testers are completely inflexible, and they won't accept things late. No, it's not in there because the developers didn't get it to you on time, right? So you need to find a way of changing the terms of the discussion, the terms of the debate, so that you're not just out there process cop enforcing these arbitrary rules and making things late in the production. Because I just can't see how that process, the way it's currently set up, turns out as anything other than a constant source of criticism directed at you. Fair enough? I realize it's easy to say and hard to do, but I would really try to solve that problem. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rex. It's my pleasure to meet you. Thank you, Mr. Rex. It's my pleasure to meet you.
My pleasure to be here, so thank you.
Actually, you talked about the 7 deadly sins of software testing. My question, as a testing team leader, there are many sins of management and development, okay?
Yes.
And they affect the testing team, okay? So how to deal with these sins, the management and the development?
Yeah. All right. So I love it, yes. We live in a land of sin. Yeah, no, it's very true. I mean, testing is downstream from pretty much everything else on the project, right? So stuff goes wrong upstream and it comes downstream and nails us, right? I mean, I wish I had a way to fix that, but I've got some ways to think. I have some ways that I have learned over the years that help me accept the fact that I can't fix it a little bit better. And one of those things is to realize that in testing, you play the hand you're dealt, which basically means that you're going to be put into a set of circumstances, and they will usually not be by any means ideal. But your challenge, your opportunity in that situation is to figure out how to do the best you possibly can given that set of circumstances. You know, so if you try to turn around and say, yeah, it's too bad that they missed the entry criteria on the planned start date. What's the best thing I can do for the organization now given this context? You know, so try to look at it that way. What's the best thing that I can do? Another thing that I think is helpful is try to understand that they're not doing it to you. Okay, it doesn't happen because people don't like you. People don't do things that sabotage effective testing because they don't like the test manager, they don't like the testers. Either they don't understand the impact, or they were put into their own constraints that led that to be the way out for them. Almost never will they deliberately sabotage you as a tester or test manager. Okay? And the other thing that I found is helpful is if I'm going to try to get somebody to change, I'm going to try to make them a former sinner, development manager, project manager, whatever. Two general rules, right? One is that people will change much more quickly in response to pain than they will to achieve a desired situation, right? So, to use an example of this, everybody knows that, you should brush your teeth and floss your teeth and take care of your teeth, right? But a lot of people don't bother to do it, or they don't regularly floss or what have you. But you find somebody who's had major dental work done, like had, in a chair with something going in their mouth for a while, man, they're like flossing their teeth all the time, right? Because that hurts, right? So pain is going to motivate change. And also, when you talk about pain, don't talk about your pain. I know, oh, it makes me sad when I get bills that won't install. Because they don't care. No one cares about your pain, right? You got to turn that around and say, their pain, right? Think about how the things that are coming into and affecting testing are negatively impacting the organization. How's it causing loss of money, opportunity costs, and then propose your change, not in terms of how much better that's going to make your testing, but in terms of how much less painful it's going to be for the organization, right? And I think if you can do that, then you've got some hope at motivating some change. But always be ready to go back to just the play that hand you're dealt, right? I mean, you know, be productive within the circumstances in which you find yourself as much as you can. All right, thanks for the great question. That was fun. Are we out of time? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was fun. Thanks for listening. Thank you for the opportunity to come back.